Hey everyone, welcome to the first developer tool community update. This is another weekly series that we're going to be doing pretty much every week. If you've been registering for all of these, we're having a different topic. So the third Thursday of each month, we're going to go over developer tooling, what's coming up, what's new, and get your feedback live from it. And also we'll post this up to YouTube. If you haven't seen, we've been uploading these to YouTube about a day or so afterwards. So yeah, feel free to watch these and register for the other webinars as they come out. This week, we're going to be talking about Workspaces. We're talking about Rust SDK, the new update, and then a little bit of a roadmap update, and then Q&A. We'll open it up at the end. So at the bottom of the screen, you should see a Q&A question. If you could ask your questions there, go ahead and post them. If you want to come up on stage and ask a question live, ping me in chat or just post a message in chat that you'd like to do that, and we'll bring you up at the end of the presentation. So yeah, without further ado, do an introduction. Austin B, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having us, and great to see everybody. I'm Austin Baggio, and I'm the product manager for the Dev Tools team. And I'm just going to reiterate what Josh said. Today, we're really excited to just share a little bit of a deeper dive into the SDK 4.0, Workspaces Rs, and then we'll talk about what we're going to focus on for this quarter and share a bit of our roadmap. So I'm joined by Austin and Fong. I'll pass over to you, Austin, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Austin, the Austin A, I guess, Austin Abel. So I'm the team lead of the developer tools team. So I'm basically focusing on like the Rust tooling, so which is centered around the Rust SDK and stuff like that. And with me, I work with Fong, Daniel, and Miraculous, and Fong is, I'll let Fong introduce himself.
All right, for sure. I'm Fong. I'm a developer on the developer tools team, and I'm mainly focused on Rust tooling, Rust testing and tooling, but mainly on Workspaces and a bunch of some other stuff too, but yeah, mainly Workspaces for now.
Cool. Sweet. Let's jump in. Let's start talking about the SDK. Austin, I think you want to share the discussion.
Yeah. So we'll share my screen. You can see my screen there now, right?
Yeah.
Sweet. So hopefully this font is big enough. If it isn't, someone bark at me. Hopefully that should be big enough to kind of read everything. So yeah, just give kind of a high level overview of what we'll be talking about today. So this is a lot of changes that have happened over a long period of time. But since this is the first time we are doing a community meeting, there is somewhat of a lot to cover. So what I've tried to do is like condense it down into the things that are going to change for like when you're actually building a contract, like what will functionally change for you. And I won't go too in depth with like actually like the lower level optimizations or anything like that. So the first main initiative that has been going on with the update to the 4.0 SDK is the collections update. So if you're not familiar with collections, these are basically just like data structures, but the state of it is actually like sharded and persisted onto the near blockchain, and this just allows it to be more scalable. But what we're changing is that we're moving these collections and like basically iterating on them to create like a version 2 of these, which are going to live under the near-SDK store module. The reason we're kind of putting it in a separate space is because we want it to be an easy transition from the old collections, but also we want to make it clear that these are actually like storing data on the blockchain and not just in-memory data structures. So how you can access these new data structures right now is if you're using any of the 4.0 pre-releases, you just have to enable the unstable feature flag. This is just going to be unstable because there might be some like format changes until this is actually released. But anyone can actually play around and use these. Most of them should stay stable, but this is just kind of so that we don't have like some breaking changes. So the plan for the migration is just that these will be stabilized soon, and then the existing ones that exist under near SDK collections will be moved under a legacy feature flag, but they will always be available so that if people want to continue using the existing collections they have, that's totally fine. So kind of the reasons or the motivations for creating these like version 2 of all these collections. The first one would be having a caching layer so that there isn't any redundant reads or writes. Right now, if you're modifying a certain key value pair or any sort of like element in these data structures, everything will be written as many times as you actually call out into it. So this basically removes all that redundancy so that all loads from storage are like kept in this caching layer and like lazily loaded. And then any changes you make are persisted at the end rather than every time you do a specific operation. So this will kind of like optimize gas usage for certain contracts. Not all, of course, but the next point of like why we're doing these changes is that it's a lot less error prone. So these APIs are going to much more closely match the Rust standard collections APIs. So it's going to be much more like idiomatic Rust and be able to like hook into a lot of the like powerful Rust, compiler features to be able to make sure there's no like data inconsistencies or like, data races or any sort of like bugs like that. And then also it allows us to do a lot of added additional APIs that didn't previously exist. So things like the entry API, if you're familiar with like the Rust hash map entry API, it's like a very convenient way to be able to get an entry and like insert if there isn't actually a value or modify if there already is. So it just creates these like additional patterns that weren't possible before, and then also allowed to like mutably iterate over a data structure rather than having to do everything manually yourself. So to give an idea of like what a pattern that's kind of like a little bit of a foot gun that exists with the current collections is when you're actually trying to modify a value, you actually have to like load it into memory, you have to modify it, and then you have to insert it back. And that's kind of like a disruptive pattern for developers because it's much more error prone because you actually have to like make sure that you're manually inserting it back and doing so in the correct way. So like, here's kind of an example of what you would have had to do before, which is, loading the value into memory, modifying it, and then inserting it back. Where with these new collections, you're able to like actually modify the values in place and it'll do everything else, for you so that you can, just write the code you need and not have to worry about, making sure all the logic connects all correctly. And this has been kind of a pain point. There's been, bugs opened with this being misused currently. So this will kind of eliminate so many different bugs and make it so much easier for people to just do what they want and have a drop-in replacement for the Rust standard collections. This obviously, there's no free lunch, like there will be downsides to this. And one of those is just that there is a little bit of overhead with this caching layer. So there might be like a slight code size increase for people that are using this stuff. Another thing to keep in mind is that the near contract standards are still going to be using the old collections for now. There is a plan to migrate this over in the future, but for now that is the case. And then also using this more idiomatic Rust API is going to be very familiar for people that are used to writing Rust. But if you're not used to writing Rust, this might actually be a little bit of a hurdle to get over at first, just to get used to how this pattern works and get used to this new API. But hopefully we'll be able to provide any documentation on how to like switch over between the two, or help anyone on this transition over. And then also another key point to mention is that some of these collections aren't actually backwards compatible on a storage level, because some were kind of modified in such a way that you can't just like drop in replace the old collection with the new one, because there was a lot of like optimizations from the reading and writing to storage that it made sense for these not to be backwards compatible. Yeah, so the next point, the next kind of initiative that we're kind of focusing on is better error handling. So within the SDK, there's a lot of patterns around unwrapping or panicking with error values, and this is kind of, it's a little bit unintuitive for people that come from writing other types of Rust programs where you're used to having like result handling and like not have to unwrap or do all this extra code for certain operations. So the first support that we're adding with this is, being able to return results at the, at the function level. So now right now we're going to have this like temporary annotation called handle result. And this is going to allow you to like put a result as a return. And basically what this is going to like it's going to create the glue code so that if this does return an error, it's basically going to panic with that error. And if it is okay with whatever value is in the okay type, it's basically going to serialize that and return it as the result as it normally would be before. And this doesn't come at any cost. Like, this is basically going to be optimized away by the compiler, this level of complexity, because you can do anything that implements asref string and basically just print out that error or like panic with that error. So it doesn't have like this overhead of having to use formatting machinery. But if you did want a more complex type that did use formatting machinery, you can do that. So that this in this discussion post that you'll have a link to, you can see like there's a more complicated example where you have an actual structured error type which has is going through formatting machinery, and you can still use that. So it's like very extensible, but also at the same time, it can be just as efficient as doing operations as you would before. So yeah, I kind of mentioned that. And yeah, just to be clear, like this is just like a temporary annotation. In the future, we will remove this. The reason we're keeping this for now is just because we want to make sure we're not silently breaking contracts that are returning a serialized result, which is kind of a different thing, where it's basically saying that this contract succeeded, but we're going to serialize whatever the result type is, which is kind of a different pattern. But then obviously in the next release, like the 5.0 release, this annotation will be removed, and you can just do error handling how you normally would. And the second parts of the error handling that we're kind of improving is the callback handling. So callbacks are common if you haven't built a Rust contract before and haven't used callbacks. They are somewhat important for doing asynchronous calls and like getting back a return result and completing with it. But currently the pattern was that whenever you're using this callback annotation, it's going to unwrap if there is any error and basically panic immediately. And that's not always like a great pattern for developers, because sometimes you actually want to like gracefully handle that error and do some logic specifically if it did fail. And this basically allows you to like have result types that you don't have to manually check if certain promises failed or succeeded, which will make just your code a lot more easily read, and then also just allow you to do certain patterns that you weren't able to do before. Some other small stuff. So if you try to migrate from version 3 to version 4, you might see that like the one change that might be the most breaking is just that account ID is now validated by default. So before, account ID was an alias to a string, and then there was this other type called valid account ID, which would do all the validation for you. And whenever you're using this type in a contract, you kind of had to think which type is which, and either unwrap from a valid account ID to an account ID to be able to interact with things. And it was kind of a very confusing pattern. So for now, everything within the internal SDK APIs are now going to be like just one type, the account ID, and it's going to be validated by default. But if you want to skip this validation and just have the contract just as optimized as it was before, you can use this like account ID new unchecked method. There's a lot of documentation on like what the differences are between the two, or like how you migrate between them, and hopefully all the examples within the SDK and otherwise are gonna make the transition simple. But that's basically a TLDR of that change. There's also no need to use the setup alloc, which was a thing that was a previous artifact in version 3, which basically set up the custom allocator to be more optimized for a WASM smart contract. This is now just like enabled by default, and if you did want to opt out of it, you can just like disable that feature. And one other thing, this is probably something that most people don't interact with, but if you were interacting with contracts on a very low level, there was kind of this weird pattern where you would have to go through this blockchain interface to be able to perform these low-level operations and interact with the syscalls directly. You wouldn't necessarily have to, but this was kind of the pattern given in examples, and was followed by a few contracts that were writing low-level contracts. But now, if you ever did want to like transition from this, it's as simple as just calling the methods directly from near-SDK, the sys module. So yeah, the code will be a lot simpler if you're trying to write low-level contracts. And yeah, this obviously isn't a pattern that most people are going to use, so I won't go too much in detail about that. The next point, which is kind of an initiative that's more current, like this is something that's happening right now, is there's a NEP 264 protocol change, which is going to affect the SDK APIs with regards to cross-contract calls. So there's a bunch of links in here. Like if you follow them, you can see all the information about like what at a low level the actual protocol change will look like. But essentially it's just adding another host function that allows utilizing the unspent gas from the current transaction. And this might seem like a very simple thing, but this actually allows a lot of patterns and allows us to simplify our APIs for calling cross-contract calls, because the current pattern is right now is you have to like specify a static and specific amount of gas for each asynchronous call you make. And this basically allows you to like split the amount of unused gas dynamically, which will make contracts, cross-contract calls much less error prone and just like much more ergonomic and code much more readable. So that's kind of the initiative there. There's links to like the PRs and the discussion and everything if you want to dig deep into like what this actually looks like, and like what the changes will be like from the current cross-contract API to the new one. There'll be more documentation once this fully finalizes. There is a PR with the implementation and all of the details as it is right now, but that isn't completely final, so I won't go too in depth with like what this will look like.
Austin,
and then
before we move on, let's just take a quick pause just to kind of cover the. We have a few questions from some of the stuff earlier.
Let's do that
before we dive into more.
I was just trying to make sure I get through it.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Give everyone else time, but yeah.
Absolutely. Till asks, are the state breaking updates? Are the state breaking updates state breaking from V3 collections, or does this affect the 4.0.0 pre-7 collections?
Yeah, so if you're upgrading from version 3 to version 4, there's no breaking changes that you have to worry about as far as like the collections. The only difference is if you're switching from the collections under near-SDK collections to the ones under near-SDK store, because they're like completely different structures, and it has to be very intentional for you to switch, which is kind of intentional, intentional by default, so that if you are doing this, you have to like think about the breaking changes. And most of the time it's drop in and replace, but if you're just upgrading from version 3 to version 4, you don't have to worry about anything being breaking. Like you can just upgrade your contract and nothing should be state breaking. If there is anything that's state breaking, then open up an issue. Like that's definitely not intended.
Awesome.
Cool. Hopefully that answers that question. Thanks.
Next question is, how will the new caching feature affect gas fees for performance?
Yeah, so there is a slight overhead. It really depends on the usage. That's why it's hard for me to give like exact numbers, because it really depends on how you're using these collections to be able to give an estimate about what that overhead looks like. It will save gas if there is a lot of overlap on the basically the values that you're indexing. Like say if you're accessing a key a couple times, you're going to save gas. But if you access all unique values, there will be a slight overhead, but that overhead grows if there's a ton of values you access. So there's a lot of complicated like different cases that you could consider. If you're curious about maybe like a specific one, like a specific use case, or like you have some code, I'm happy to just like look it over and give a suggestion on like what the differences will be. But yeah, it's really hard to give like exact figures of like, oh, there's 5% overhead or it'll decrease gas costs by this percentage, because it really depends on the usage.
Got it.
Sorry for not being able to give like a very specific answer to that, but hopefully that's helpful.
Cool. No worries. Awesome. And then just a couple shout outs. June's excited about that they can use the proper account ID rather than a string using in VM context. Super excited about that. And then also, a few +1s for the better error handling and callbacks. I'll also add a +1 to that. I'm really excited that there's going to be better error handling there as well. Cool. Yeah. And again, keep throwing the questions in the Q&A button at the bottom. We'll keep answering them as they come. As far as the gas or the protocol, the NEP 264, there was one question on that. It said, so the gas on the new cross-contract call will now be automatically allocated, as in no more static setting of the gas amount?
Oh yeah, so let me get more in detail with that, because I really should have covered that. There's no flexibility loss. Like you can still specify a static amount of gas, and you can configure the amount of basically the amount of the weight of how much unused gas you're going to be allocating to each contract. But by default, essentially each, like the API right now that was proposed is essentially going to attach a weight of 1 to all of the different function calls with 0 static gas. So it'll just split everything evenly by default. And then if you do want to configure and like add a static amount to each, or just even remove the weight, so you say you don't want to include extra gas onto specific operations, there's no flexibility loss. Like this is purely just like a value add. Like you don't have to hook into this pattern. Like you can avoid it if you want. It'll just be a simpler API, and then you'll have this ability to just like not have to think about gas if you have a very simple use case, or if you want to utilize gas more efficiently. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
So yeah, just to kind of tie things in, the 4.0 stable release plan, I know this is like obviously a very, delayed thing. It's something that I've wanted to get the stable out earlier, but the idea was to have this improved cross-contract API in with this stable release. So that's kind of, we have to wait for the protocol change to come through. So that implementation within near core has been released and it has been deployed to testnet. But we won't be able to stabilize the SDK until it gets released on mainnet, which is in a month. So in that month, the SDK will be released, but people can play around with these APIs before and like use it on testnet. But because it doesn't work on mainnet, we can't necessarily release it, or else people's contracts won't work on mainnet. So yeah, if you want to start playing with this on testnet, that's totally a possibility. So yeah, that's the plan. And then there's a tracking issue for the 4.0 release. If anyone's curious when that's going to happen, like you just follow that issue, and it'll be updated once that happens.
One follow-up question.
Right here. Yeah.
Hang on 1 second. One follow-up question about the caching. It says you mentioned the caching save gas if a key is get multiple times. Is this detected during compile time? Example, cleverly don't cache if it knows it needs it only once, and then cache it otherwise during compile time, as things that are repeated will be known.
Yeah, that's not the case, because the thing is you actually need that cache to get the same API. Like for example, when you're doing a get, you're going to be getting a reference to the value. And to be able to get a reference to that value, you actually need that the value to be put in the cache, and then you're getting a reference to it. This might be getting too technical, but like but basically the short answer is like we can't just like cache only if it's being accessed more than once, and not only if it's being accessed once, because the API is fundamentally different if that's the case. So yeah, it's just an initiative to make sure that it's way less error prone.
Cool, awesome, thank you.
I think that answers that question.
yeah. Feel free to, feel free anybody to follow up with more questions. Keep dropping them in, and we'll keep answering them as we go. But yeah,
if it doesn't answer, I'm happy to follow up with that. Cool. And give more detail. So yeah, if there's no other questions right now, or for now, I'll just keep moving on to the next kind of shorter section. But this is more stuff that we're focusing on right now, or something more for the future and early on is what we're calling, this name is very much open to be changing in the future, but is what we're calling right now an ACI, which is like our take on an ABI, which is basically like an application contract interface. And what it's intended to be is like a human readable schema. So when someone writes a contract, you can actually have this schema to be able to see how to interface with it. And this kind of provides a lot of flexibility, because not only does it allow people to easily see how to interact with contracts, but you can also generate clients based on this and be able to, at compile time, connect any sort of front end script or even another contract through cross-contract calls at compile time, which is kind of like very powerful to be able to like eliminate a bunch of like redundant duplicate code of having to like define the interface on the front end and on the on the contract and on the front end, and make sure they're connected correctly. And that's especially difficult when you're doing it in different languages. So this is kind of the initiative that we're working on right now. It's going to be similar in ways to the Solidity ABI, if you're familiar, if you're coming from the Ethereum space. But it's obviously going to have its differences, because Near has differences in its protocol and stuff like that. There is kind of like an example of what this somewhat will look like, but obviously not final. Just to give an idea of like what the format will look like, is it's going to have some data about which methods are exposed, what the details about those methods are, and any details around like the serialization format of any parameters or result. So yeah, I won't go too much in detail about this because around the specific format, because that is like subject to change. Like it is something we're iterating on and making sure we're doing it correctly. So if you do have any opinions about what this, what should be included in the schema, or anything that you think is off, like please feel free to like either share in this discussion, or there will be one made specifically for the ACI in the future. And we'd love your input is basically what I'm trying to say here. So basically the three kind of components of like this initiative is, one, deciding on a schema format that is kind of accessible for everyone and intuitive for people to use. And then the first part of that is like, we want to be able to generate the schema from the SDKs so that people don't have to like manually define this or anything. It's basically you write your contract and then you'll be able to like emit this schema, file or, IDL or whatever it is in JSON format. And then the third part is just like being able to generate a client from this. So being able to like generate the glue code to be able to like interact with this through a client library, through RPC, or, through a cross contract call. So that's kind of the initiative. Obviously I'm not going too much in detail with this because it's very early stages. But if you do want to follow like the kind of proof of concept, you can see the work that Daniel has been doing on his branch. It's all linked in the discussion here. But yeah, once it's more like, fully connected and usable, we will kind of like share that with the community and hopefully get as much input as possible. And yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. I don't know if there's any like final questions. I might kind of scan through this before I pass it off to Fong.
Yeah, just one question about with the ACI asking about if there will be some sort of implementation of this in Explorer. Might be a little bit soon to have an answer on that, but yeah. Are there any thoughts with that?
So like it's maybe possible. It's not exactly. So the difference is why it probably won't be on the Explorer is because this schema won't actually exist on chain. This is a purely off chain like tooling thing to be able to interact with. You are like, maybe there is some way like we can allow to be able to like upload schemas or something like that to the Explorer so people can see like what the contract interface looks like. Definitely possible, and will give you a lot better diagnostics. And there's so much flexibility with what you can do in front ends to be able to like see what contract or how to interact with the contracts, and then be able to like easily call out into them and perform transactions on them. So Explorer is definitely possible, but more so with other tooling such as just like any sort of front ends, maybe even the wallet. Like if you're trying to like interact with certain contracts, I'm not really sure. I mean, there's tons of different options, but yeah, hopefully that gives somewhat of an answer to that question.
Cool. Yeah, well, without further ado,
I'll pass it over to Fong.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we'll pass it over to Fong unless there's anything else you'd like to cover.
No, that's pretty much high level of what I want to cover.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, and keep dropping those questions after Fong does his presentation. We'll open it up for kind of an AMA on anything. So keep dropping questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen.
All right, sweet. So thanks, Austin, for that update. Let's continue on to Workspaces. Let's see, let me share this desktop. Okay. Can anyone see the discussion notes here?
Yep.
Sweet. So I'll be discussing Workspaces today. If you don't know what that is, going forward, Workspaces will be replacing SIM SDK tests, and those will be deprecated, and Workspaces will be the one go-to stop for that now, since it has a lot of niceties and improvements over them, like being able to benchmark and get accurate gas usage from calling into contracts themselves while testing. But yeah, so like today I'm just going to be discussing what's changed in Workspaces 0.2. So we've added a couple new features like time travel, so you can advance to a future state in your local testing environment. So this will be if your contract relies on anything time sensitive or anything related to like block heights or epoch heights, you can basically just advance into the future and be able to test that really easily. that's without like having to wait for the actual blocks to be produced themselves, which is pretty nice in my opinion.
Traveling, it's awesome.
And I'll show this a little bit more later on in a live demo of testing this with croncat, a scheduling contract. Some other noteworthy features is compiling your projects on the fly while testing. You can specify a path to your contract's project, basically. So like if it's you have a cargo.toml and you define like your smart contract in a specific folder, you just target there and it'll compile it for you, give you back the WASM, and you can deploy it right then and there in the test itself. Some other changes that happened were some breaking API changes, such as needing a wait before spinning up a sandbox, but most of them are pretty much convenience changes. So if you want to see what that is like, please take a look at the changelog in Workspaces Rs. Workspaces is really new, so a lot of feedback is definitely needed and appreciated. If you guys are going to go take a look at that, see where we can improve. There's definitely a good amount of cruft that I haven't seen that still needs to be spotted for sure. But yeah, it's definitely new, and it's whatever you guys want to see out of it. I just know there's some features that are really nice to have, but maybe I don't know all of them. So please leave any feedback. And without further ado, let me go to the demo itself. Okay, can you guys see it in my code editor?
Yeah, we can see it.
Sweet. So this is, before I go explain what the code does, let me run it just so you guys can see the output. And this is the croncat example itself. You guys will be able to see this on the repo if you want to follow more in depth. I've left a couple comments. This should be in later this week. But yeah, as that's running, let me explain what's happening in here. So first off, let's just get some of the concrat contracts inside the croncat repo. You can find that over here if you follow this example. And that contract will be the manager to schedule your task and run specific, basically run specific tasks in the future or in a specific time. But yeah, so this is what it would normally look like for this specific example. We start with spinning up a sandbox. And with this worker that we grab from the sandbox being spun up, we can use it to deploy contracts and then call into them. So there's a specific counter contract I'm going to be deploying as well, which is just to increment decrement by 1. It's you can find that on the near examples website, and that's like the most basic contract you can get with just like increment and decrementing. I'm also going to be deploying the manager contract itself, which will be scheduling all the tasks later on. Then afterwards, we're gonna be creating, or we're gonna be scheduling the task itself every hour with this specific call right here. And this is just croncat specific notation for cron syntax. And that will be just for every hour. So yeah, and then we'll have just an agent to be able to run that specific task. Then we'll actually like try to actually run it. So this is just a lot of boilerplate from like croncat itself, just trying to register the agent and stuff. You can just look through croncat's documentation if you want to learn more about that. But this is the juicy bit where I wanted to really show. So after an agent has been registered to execute the task, we're going to fast forward about an hour into the future, or 4,500 blocks. And this will allow us to test whether this task has been scheduled and has been executed or not. So then we'll try to execute the task given the conditions on the contract that an hour has passed, and we can actually like see if the task has been ran or not. And after all that is said and done, we should be able to see that the task has been ran, and we get like rewards for executing that task from our agent. And yeah, and we should see like the amount profited after executing the task itself. And it should be done by now. Let's see my outputs. Yeah, so yeah, the agent profited like this amount of Yoctonir from executing that specific task we scheduled. And all of this is using time travel. And we don't have, so like before, you would actually have to wait an hour to execute this whole entire test. But now with fast forwarding, you only probably wait like a minute or so. And yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions on any of this. But otherwise, I can just pass it on to Austin Baggio with the roadmap.
Cool. Yeah, no, I don't see any questions yet, but yeah, if anybody has any, please drop them in. If you could basically, I was actually just about to ask this. Someone just posted this question about Workspaces JS having a similar interface. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the differences between Workspaces RS versus Workspaces JS.
Sure, yeah. Let's see. So Workspaces JS is basically the JS counterpart to the RS version. Its API slightly differs a little bit because it's been out of date for a bit, but it's being picked up now, and you should see like a release in the next month or two with like newer API changes and like catching up to what RS has with time traveling. But yeah, mostly JS. The JS side of things is for front end. If you want to use it for any kind of front end you want to test on. The RS one is mainly for if you want to have like a Rust contract and test everything end to end on Rust and have those guarantees all be there. But for the most part, the feature set should be roughly the same between the two. It's just that each one will have their own set of conveniences, like with different convenience functions and whatnot. But they're very similar. Like that, yeah, just testing it out and the behavior under the hood is all very similar. It's just spinning up a Sandbox node where you can interact through it via a worker and be able to call into contracts, deploy them like usual. But yeah, that's pretty much just what they're like between the two.
So it's almost like a one-to-one, like it's just different languages, but you would suggest individuals use Workspaces JS when they're trying to test like near API JS functionality with their contracts versus Workspaces RS is not really for that. It's more like digging deeper into Rust smart contracts. Is that correct?
Right. Yes.
So there are things that Rust cannot do or Rust can do that JS can't, and vice versa. Maybe it might actually be a good idea for us to kind of like, not during this call, but as we have those tools listed in our documentation, kind of go over maybe like a check box of like, this is the features, like they both can do this, but JS is more for this and RS is more, more helpful for that. But is there anything like on the top of mind that you could elaborate on?
Yeah, no, yeah, specifically just that. Like, I mean, like just Rust, Rust for the Rust workspaces for Rust contracts, and likewise for JavaScript.
Gotcha.
The TypeScript.
Yeah, I think it's important to also keep in mind that they're very interchangeable. Like you can test a Java, an assembly script or JavaScript contract with the Rust workspaces, and you could do vice versa if you want it. I mean, some people might want to write a Rust contract and test it in JavaScript because their front end might be in a JavaScript front end. So it's really just whatever people's preference is.
But once it's like compiled to WASM, it doesn't really matter what you're using. It's just testing the WASM file at that point, right?
Yeah, there's no connection between the like whatever SDK you use and whatever workspace is. It's just
Gotcha.
Oh, one slight remark. It might be a little bit different for the JavaScript SDK that's coming, but those will be highlighted when it comes out. Yeah.
Cool. So they're just pretty much almost similar tools, but just depending on what language you're more comfortable working with.
Right.
Cool. Awesome. Someone asked also, does this mean that Jest, Simulator, Sandbox, and local testing are going to be deprecated? As you indicated, this actually works with Sandbox, so that's kind of like the playground that you're, or I guess maybe I'll let you answer this question as well.
So by local tests, do you mean like the unit tests in the SDK itself? Because those will still be there in some form, but like if you use like a init simulator in SDK, that will be deprecated.
Yeah, this is all for like simulation, like you're trying to simulate activity on the blockchain. That's what these testing frameworks are for.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, it will be completely replacing that. And well, it's not really simulating anymore. So it's more like it's almost an accurate representation of what would happen on the blockchain itself. Just it's literally just a node on the blockchain, but disconnected from the rest of the network.
Cool. Awesome. That's a good way to
and just getting super specific on that, like Sandbox obviously was designed to simulate like a real environment. That's why we have it, and that's why it's going to be a much better tool to use in the future. And just being like really clear with sim tests, like yes, it will be deprecated. We'll be providing migration like playbooks, like really good documentation, really good examples. And of course, we'd love feedback for anyone that is planning on going through I'll just call it like the sim test to Workspaces migration. We would love feedback so that we can make sure that like you have everything you need, all the tools to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And the DevRel team is going to be working on deprecating some tests from the examples that we currently have, and then showing how to use these new frameworks on there as well. So yeah, definitely. And again, please leave us feedback if any questions, issues, comments, concerns. But yeah, you're definitely going to love it more than simulation tests, because I know a lot of developers have had some issues running those. But yeah, Jest tests will still be, you can still run those with your contracts, and yeah, same like local tests in your Rust smart contracts will still be there. But yeah, this is more like you, and then using Sandbox. So Sandbox not going anywhere, we're actually using it. It's just a framework built on top of it. Someone asked, can we estimate gas consumption in Workspaces Rs? I believe that is a feature here. That's kind of one of the awesome things that we have, is like a gas profile. Oh, maybe we can elaborate on that. I would say A, yes, we can estimate gas consumption, but B, I remember there was some sort of tool that we were working on, which is like a profiler, and it actually was telling you how much gas you're using to like spin up the VM and do all these, like kind of breaking it down. Is that in Workspaces, or is that going to be in Workspaces?
That part I'm not so sure of, but like if you want to estimate gas itself, like you can do it per transaction, like right in Workspaces. Like whenever you create a transaction and submit it to the network, you'll get back your gas burnt for it, and you should be able to accumulate all that yourself and see how much gas is being consumed for your whole entire automation script or testing workflow.
Awesome.
And the breakdown was something within near core. It was something that was considered being exposed to like Workspaces, but that's not like immediately available.
Got it.
But it possibly could be something in the future.
Cool. And then as far as like estimating cross-contract call gas, is that something that Workspaces will be able to do? So I'll know in my cross-contract, for my promise chain, I can know exactly how much gas each cross-contract call is using.
Yes. Like at the top level, you'll get the aggregate of all the cross-contract calls, but for each of the receipts or each of the cross-contract calls, you should be able to get the gas burnt as well for each of them.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, that's super awesome. Cool. Okay, a couple more questions. Will there be an npm Rust package to be able to pull this in as a version control dependency?
That is not in the plans right now, but could be. Please submit a ticket and I'll take a look at that.
Awesome. Cool. For Workspaces JS, is the environment set up new for every test or only once? I have 6 tests that take about 5 minutes.
So it depends on what kind of functions in the JavaScript side you're using. So there is an optimization feature where you can call fork, which copies the state of the sandbox and spins up a new one while not having to reinitialize anything. And that's like the fastest way to go about it. But if you're purely just calling into let's say init every single time, then it will spin up a sandbox every single time and have to reinitialize everything.
Cool. Let me
Yeah,
know. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna. Yeah, I don't know if you were completely done with that question, but I was just gonna jump back to the previous one. I think when they're referring to being able to pull this in as a version control dependency, I think they were talking about workspaces, maybe not Sandbox. In which case, there is like, yeah, it is deployed. It is on crates.io, so you can pull workspaces itself. I don't know. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the question that they asked, and maybe we can get a clarification. But yeah, both these are able to be pulled in through whatever build system, Java npm and crates.io.
Yeah. If it's purely Sandbox, then yeah, there's npm package for it already. If you're trying to use the Rust workspaces in npm, that'd be a little bit different. But yeah, if that's the case, please submit an issue and I'll have to take a look at it.
Cool. Yeah, please ask any more questions. Cool. Where can I watch this video again? On our YouTube. So YouTube/near-protocol. It will be uploaded tomorrow or by tomorrow. Yes, you can watch this video again on YouTube. Thanks for asking that question. June asks, what does it mean by agent profited in the output at the end of your test?
All right, so it's a little bit, yeah. So there's agent is like a thing inside croncat itself. An agent executes the task that gets scheduled on the contract, and agents don't really work for free. So once an agent executes a task, it gets a reward. So therefore, like the profit is basically the reward they get from executing the task itself. Cool. If that makes any sense. Yeah.
Awesome. Not at all related, but since someone mentioned Node npm, are you guys using dev futures or considering moving to Deno?
I do not know, because I don't work on the JavaScript side of things. That would be best left for Bo or Serhi, but you can ask that in an issue on the Workspaces Js repo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any of these, again, the discussions that were shared earlier by both Austin and Fong will be on the individual repos. You go to GitHub discussions, and then inside there, we're having a live conversation about these features, releases, any kind of feedback that you want to give us would be awesome. And then, yeah, next month on this tooling webinar, we will hopefully have some of the JavaScript guys on board, talk about near API JS, Workspaces JS. I don't know, maybe get an update on the JavaScript SDK, which I'm really excited about as well. So feel free to come back next month in the tooling meeting and ask some more of those questions. Hopefully we'll have those individuals on the panel. Cool. Yeah, I think I can pass this off now to Austin B.
That's a perfect segue. In a month, we're hoping to be able to talk about the JavaScript SDK. Can you guys see that slide there? I'm just gonna go. Just gonna go over at a high level, like Austin Fong just talked in amazing detail about some of the stuff that's really top of mind for us. So this is going to be a little bit repetitive, but I just wanted to drill a little bit deeper into what we're going to focus on over the next quarter and share the roadmap. So the first one is make near the most successful blockchain for Web 2 developers. JavaScript SDK, JavaScript Workspaces, this is obviously going to be huge and will help us onboard a ton of new developers. Second, we've got streamlined and improved developer experience for creating full stack apps. I'll dig into that a little bit more. And then another one is just from a Pagoda perspective, we just want to get better at making product decisions. A lot of it is about getting feedback from the community, and we just want to do that better. So doing a little bit of a deeper dive into each of these, making near the most successful blockchain for Web 2 developers, JavaScript SDK, Workspaces, Workspaces JS. We're actively working on it. Bo, Serhi are on it right now. We're hoping to have that launch this quarter, and just unlocking an entire new set of developers that are more comfortable in JavaScript writing contracts. So and just hand in hand with that comes with not just releasing the repos or updating the repos. It's like updating readmes, documentation, examples, creating tutorials, and all that. So expect that to come and keep us honest for how we can make it as easy as possible for everyone to get started. Streamlined and improved developer experience for creating full stack apps. Austin already talked about the ACI/ABI/metadata/ whatever we eventually call it. We'll settle on a name. Yeah, and Fong obviously just talked about pushing workspaces as our primary testing framework, which comes with deprecating sim tests and making sure that that's a really easy process. Another item that we'll likely talk about in the future is just getting feedback on project initialization. So our goal for this quarter is to create a spec around how we should think about project initialization in the future. We're not going to promise that we're going to have that done in the next couple of months, but we obviously need community feedback in that area. We know that there's some pain around like project initialization, like create near app, like the CLIs and things like that. So a focus for us. And then the one that I didn't mention there was M1 support. We just want to have M1 support. Should be able to install assembly script or test with the Sandbox using an M1 device. So we'll be working on that. Yeah, and then finally, the making better product decisions, getting feedback. Like one of the things we want to do is more sessions like this. We're going to hopefully run 3 over the next quarter. And we're going to improve our project management tooling, which hopefully just increases transparency and just gives us a feedback tool for our feedback mechanism to get feedback from the community back to the development team. And then the final one is just like, we just want to make sure that we're evaluating all of the other ecosystems. So we're going to give like our team some time to explore other ecosystems, other solutions that are adjacent to the products we're working on. If you have any suggestions or have any ideas, please just reach out or add to the discussion for stuff you'd love to see us building. And then that's a segue into the roadmap. The reason why I'm sharing this is just to reiterate our focus, but also to say what's not on here. What did you like in the community expect to see on this roadmap from the dev tools team? So I'm not going to go into deep. We've already talked about all of these. So, but yeah, Rust SDK, getting that launched, JavaScript SDK and Workspaces, or JavaScript SDK and Workspaces JS. Sorry, I should say JS, not SDK. Delivering an ACI, working on project initialization tooling, and then eventually mobile client libraries, which we'll probably talk about in the future. But the one plug here is let us know what we're missing. Let us know what you need. Let us know what's broken. Let us know what you expect, and we can obviously adjust this. So I think with that, it's questions. If there's any other questions, I've got links to the GitHub discussion here, and obviously you can find us on Discord and join office hours. But I'm just going to pause. Is there anything else from the community?
Yeah, Matthias asked, you said something about other ecosystems, and curious what you meant about by that.
Yeah. So from a developer tools perspective, obviously we're trying to build everything that we think we need to build to make Near the most easy to use blockchain and to grow. We're hyper aware that there's other layer ones that exist that have solved problems and have really elegant solutions. So we just want to be able to give space for our team to investigate what those are. And again, I'm going to turn this around to an ask. If there's an amazing tool from another ecosystem that you've used, share it with us. Let us know. Let us know how what we've built so far has maybe not met expectations. Does that answer that question?
I think it does. They haven't responded. Yes, it does. They said yes. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the update. Yeah. Again, please continue to ask questions. We got about 5 more minutes left. Cool. Some more coming in. What about near-sdk-rs? Is that actively deployed? And thinking about how 4.x would affect that. So yeah, do we have any updates on near-sdk-rs?
Yeah, so the CLI and the Rust SDK versions are not tied together in any way. Like you can use any CLI version with any SDK version. It is being developed. It isn't obviously the priorities right now are these things that we mentioned right now. But is a plan to have the Rust CLI be kind of have first class support. And be brought up to feature parity with the traditional JavaScript CLI. I don't know if anyone else wants to add any details. I'm not sure what other details whoever asked is curious about, but yes, there is a plan to kind of push that along and make it actually it is usable right now. I personally like to use it myself, but as far as like, I don't know if it has complete feature parity, but hopefully with the next call, there'll be people that, work on that and be able to give more detail.
Yeah, I can give a little bit more detail too. So there, so mostly it's like still mostly being developed on. Like as it hasn't actually been like prioritized as much as what Austin has said, but it will have like a lot more features in the future with like extension systems and like being able to add more stuff to it than just your normal near CLI JS version of it. Like similarly to some of the other CLI tools you might have seen, like just being able to, let's say, I don't know, npm add something, and you'd be able to do it like npm a different subcommand or something like that. But yeah, most of this is still being in develop stage, so not much progress has been made on that either.
Cool. Someone's asking about documentation for near API JS or more hands-on examples. Yeah, like I was saying before, nobody on this call is currently working on near API JS. The wallet team uses it heavily, and there's some individuals that are going to be contributing to updating that library specifically. It is a very highly used library, and it hasn't been getting as much attention as we would like. Definitely been hearing that from the community. Definitely going to be working on that in this next quarter. They're already, I believe, working on shipping new features and code around that. But yeah, I would love to have them a part of next month's conversation about where we're at with that library, because yeah, super important, and really want to put a lot of love into near API JS, or NAJ as we internally refer to it. So yeah, thanks for that question. And then you just asked about examples. Another person said something about these tools are nice. Are you also considering updating examples and documentation? Yeah, that's on the DevRel team, my team. We are going to be, we're actively hiring individuals, and we're building out the team right now. Right now, we've been primarily focusing on developer support in the channels. Plug for our office hours, which we have twice daily. If you go to near.org/office-hours, you can see when we have those in Discord. So yeah, if you have any questions or concerns, jump into one of those sessions with us live, and we can, you can share your screen, can walk you through code, stuff like that. But yeah, examples are on the roadmap. We're currently, I just kicked off a conversation with the education team, and they're going to be partnering with us to help create a good set of canonical examples for everyone. Because yeah, right now we have the same examples, and we've been just kind of patching them and making sure that they all work and not failing. So you can see one of our new DevRel members, Dennis, has been doing a lot of testing in the individual repos, making sure they're not failing and staying up to date with all the new versions that are being released. But as far as more examples, we definitely have that as high priority, and you can see more to come soon. So stay tuned. And I love the feedback. Keep it coming.
Yeah, one other thing about that is the examples within the repos themselves are kept up to date with the code. So if you are curious and want some examples of all the latest stuff, you can look inside either the SDK or the Workspaces repos.
Awesome. Thanks for flagging that. Cool. What is going to happen with NPX Create Near app? Anybody have comments on that?
Yeah, I'll take it for now.
Cool.
Like, honest answer, we don't know yet. So like when we work on like the project initialization like problem, like near create app is going to be a part of that. Whether it's deprecated, whether it's just updated, is still very TBD, just to be completely honest. So we will share more as we figure it out, and it's not just going to magically go away one day. We'll obviously have the community involved in that decision making. Kind of an unsatisfying non-answer, but it's the honest truth. We'll figure it out.
Totally. Cool. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, Matthias said, hey, near CLI-RS is blowing near CLI out of the water. Just saying. There's got a lot of really cool features in there. I'm really stoked to see kind of, like we built near CLI a couple of years ago, and having that time and space to kind of think about how would we want to do it if we started all the way over from scratch. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone for joining. Look out for this video to be uploaded either later today or tomorrow. And yeah, see you next month. If you want to be a part of any of these other webinars, we have one each week, every same time, every Thursday. Check it out. Come into office hours, hang out with us, talk with us, and yeah, get in on those GitHub discussions, give us some feedback. We'd love to have you help us shape our future of our products and tools. So awesome. Thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.